Well,
in here.
welcome to theLAND's Future of Music panel. I'm your host, Jeff Weiss. I'm sitting here with four of my esteemed friends and colleagues and just people I admire. So I'll just do a quick round of introductions. I'll go in order of top left. That's Cypress Moreno. He is a DJ, he is a producer. If you've heard any of the best West Coast LA rap songs of the last 5 years, you've heard Cypress. He's a tastemaker, he's doing label things. He just had a big song with T Grizzly topping the streaming charts. He's DJ'd for Shoreline Mafia. When I want to know what the pulse of Los Angeles is like, Cypress is the person I would go to. So yeah, thank you for being here, Cypress.
Of course, thanks for having me. What's up, y'all?
And then below him is the great Kyambo hip hop Joshua. Even if you don't recognize the name immediately, there is a 0% chance you haven't heard some of the records that hip hop has been involved with. He was a legendary A&R at Rosecrans Records, behind artists like small-time artists like Jay-Z and Kanye West. You know,
when they was.
Is now the owner of Seneca Village Recordings, which is a new label. Put out a great record last year from Injury Reserve. Also a Mike Davis scholar, as I saw from his Instagram story. So he's hitting all of the land.
Learned about LA. You know, I'm a visitor. So I gotta, learn the land.
Yeah. Awesome.
No pun intended.
Thank you for being here. Below him is my friend and colleague, Rosecrans Vic.
Hey.
Vic to me is one of the most important cultural figures in LA hip hop of the last several years. Incredible tastemaker, writer, blogger. He has a story in our latest issue with the group The Chosen Few, who are from the 60s area, South Central. They're all Central American rappers, and Vic kind of told this amazing story about kind of the changing Los Angeles. And these rappers is a big part in it. He has his own label, Rosegrown Records. Great guy, one of the most talented people I know. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate that. Excited to be here.
Yeah. All right.
Yes, sir.
And last but not least, we have the esteemed Andrea Domanick, who was formerly the West Coast editor at Noisy, which was obviously Vice's music website. She's also the co-host of the new great podcast, the Culture Journalist podcast, that I had the fortune of being on that just came out today. So go check that out. But go check out all the episodes that they've done. I think I was the fourth, right?
Yeah.
They've all been great. It's a wonderful podcast. She co-hosted with Emily Friedlander, another wonderful journalist. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Stoked to be here with all of you.
Yeah. All right, here we are in the Zoom world, in the apocalypse. Feels totally normal and natural. just
Of course.
Yeah.
Hold one
panels
with several hundred of our closest Zoom people watching.
That many? You got me scared.
So anyways, I thought we could just start off, obviously it's not the least bit awkward, so we won't even mention that it's awkward because we're all Zooming, but feel free to jump in, interrupt anyone. I'll do my best to kind of referee in case everyone just starts brawling and screaming at each other, which we all of course hope for because it makes for good Zoom. All right, so I guess the first question we could start off with is, it's a broad general question which no one has any answers to, which are my favorite kind of questions to ask. And maybe you could start off, Andrea, because you wrote, self-promotional thing aside, going on. Andrea wrote an amazing story about the future of music for this print issue of theLAnd magazine, which you can purchase online at thelandmag.com at our favorable stores around Los Angeles. So maybe you could start off talking, Andrea, about, obviously, we're in a pandemic. It's great. It's a lovely time. Everyone's had a great year. And by the way, if my camera is looking weird to everyone watching this, it's because of the apocalyptic fire of the sun.
It is so crazy right now.
Casting strange clothes, so I might block out in 2 seconds. But yeah, Andrea, maybe you could start talking about what do you see as the future of the local music scene now with the pandemic kind of in month 7?
Yeah, just really starting it off soft there, Jeff.
Let's go right into it, yeah.
It's everything, as with everything, it's all very up in the air. I think for independent venues in particular, the future is very much on the edge of it being like what a lot of professionals I've talked to are calling an extinction level event. Just meaning that if Congress doesn't pass the Restart Act, which is currently up in the air, and allowing these kind of businesses to have some kind of financial support for like an extended 6 months, they just have no way to keep operating. I mean, the thing to understand about these spaces is that like there's no, and I think I said this in my piece, like there's no curbside pickup for live music. They're either open all the way or they're not. But meanwhile, they're still paying mortgage, utilities, rent, insurance, all of these other huge expenses. I mean, this is why these places like have enough, hard enough time like surviving when it's not the pandemic, so that future is very uncertain. I mean, there's been some really great lobbying work done on behalf of these spaces, in LA and across the country. And, they've had letters that have been signed by like 600 Grammy winning artists. People are really getting behind this. I've been trying to make a lot of noise about it as a journalist. Like that is a solution, a holdover until there's a vaccine, which realistically is like the only way venues are ever going to reopen.
Is there any idea, is there any understanding of when Congress might act on it, or if, or what the likelihood of it is going to be?
I mean, it's in the pipeline right now. I'm actually talking to, you guys tune into the podcast next week. We'll have an episode all about this where we're talking to the organizers and some venue owners as well. But it's just up for the vote. I'm not quite sure when it is. I'm not sure the vote has even been set yet, but it's like in the next few weeks. It's like happening very soon. So hopefully, I mean, who knows anymore, but.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the other three panelists, you guys have worked in hip hop now for quite some time, and you've seen kind of how, strong independent a venue network can really help build kind of the career of an artist. I was going to ask maybe hip hop, like when you were, coming up in New York at the time, I assume you went to a lot of, obviously the underground shows and clubs. Have you, over the last, obviously you're in LA now, but I imagine there was kind of, the number of independent venues was already dwindling in a place like New York City. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's kind of like, because SOBs, for example, that every artist come through in hip hop is not an artist who haven't performed there, I don't think, hip hop wise. And they're like a Spanish club way downtown in a weird area that the artist brings the people there, to where most clubs is based on the artists and the trends of what's going on musically. A lot of them can't survive without the artists because they're not like bars and stuff like that. So maybe a few bars that have that type of thing could maybe get going before, but it's definitely looking bleak if we don't have, somebody step in as far as government or something on that level.
Yeah. I mean, in LA, obviously I hosted a night with Vic and Cypress called Don't Come to LA years ago. And actually one of the reasons why we stopped doing it was just so difficult to get a venue that was consistent, and we liked it, and we liked the vibe. And that's in LA a few years ago, which is, I don't know, Vic, you've thrown a ton of shows, Cypress, feel free to chime in. How difficult was it, in your experience, kind of to find like a place that was hosting shows where you could, it's so, obviously you guys both know that the margins are so thin when you're promoting a show, you often lose money more than you make money. And kind of how do you think this whole thing will only impact the limited amount of venues there already were?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like in LA already there were like 5 or maybe 6 like small venues to kind of choose from. And you had to be creative, and also like we didn't personally want to do, a venue that everybody throws shows at. We wanted to make it a little more special, and like this is like the place to go if you want to go to Don't Come to LA or like a Rosecrans show. And it was already, like you said, the margins were already kind of so thin, you couldn't book like that big of an artist because there's only 150 to 200 capacity in there, or maybe the 300, you know what I mean, if you go to like the Echo or something like that, but they have dates booked like months in advance sometimes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so now I would imagine that like a lot of those venues, like we're going to have even less to choose from, you know what I mean? To where I personally think it's going to go back underground to where there's like more warehouse shows, house party shows. Like you guys probably seen that Blue Bucks made the news when they threw like a party in Glendora. Like that kind of stuff is going to keep happening, and it was so crowded and packed. Like, you know, I personally didn't want to go, but like it's, you know what I mean? It's like I feel like there's a lot of people are going to want to go, you know what I mean? And I think that's kind of where things are going to go. And I don't think it's that safe, but you know, people want to party and they want to do their thing, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think even afterwards, it's going to be difficult, right? Because I mean, like DIY venues also were another thing. You know, in LA, obviously the legendary venue, The Smell, was permanently endangered because of gentrification in downtown Los Angeles. You know, you can't. I can't even really. There's not even that many DIY venues to speak of. We actually have an article in the magazine about it, but they're really limited. And you know, I remember there was a place called Lot One in Echo Park. That was a really great place a few years ago, and now it's like a Monty's vegan burger. Where it is, and you're just like,
I was there the other day.
Yeah, they're not the good burgers.
They have good milkshakes.
Really good milkshakes. They're good. I would rather have the DIY venue and have the somewhere else.
Definitely.
But, yeah. In Atlanta, they doing some cool things with the drive-in shows. They got like parking lot shows where it's like a big parking lot, and they got the artists performing on top of trailers. Yeah. And then everybody's just kind of like pull up in their cars, and you get outside your cars. So you're still within social distancing, but it's been a lot of shows from, I don't see Ross, Young Dolph,
really?
I think 2 Chainz. Like a nice amount of artists have did it already. And because Atlanta is close to active. I feel like I think they're going to be the first one to really have a official show. The first show might be at the Tabernacle, I think. It just feel like they close to there, and I don't think that. I think if an artist had one right now, it will be packed.
Yeah,
right now.
They didn't even close Magic City, right? Because Lou Williams, by Jack Harlow, which was a real L for the hip hop community with that one.
Yeah,
in all facets of Jack Harlow. Yeah, no.
Jack Harlow.
He seems like a nice person or something. Usually, yeah. So I was going to ask, Cypress, maybe you could take this question. Obviously, one of the most stark impacts I think the pandemic has had, going forward in the future is the impact on musicians. Clearly, show money. You were on tour with Shoreline Mafia all over the country and the world for 2 years. All of a sudden it comes to an abrupt halt. How do you feel musicians have been able to kind of adjust their lives with the pandemic? And like, I assume they're in the studio more, but like, how, kind of take me through what that looks like for an artist.
Yeah, I mean, most artists are in the studio. They're it's kind of been like a gift and a curse for some of my friends that I've kind of like I've noticed the time on the road. It's a great time, the show money, that's great, but this time kind of allowed people to kind of get back in the studio, be more creative, and work harder. We all miss the show money, though. We all miss the shows. We all miss the atmosphere. It all coincides and goes hand in hand with the streaming nowadays. I'm seeing like a difference in the streaming. Streaming numbers were always, steady and increasing as we were on the road touring. But from the outside looking in, it looks like the streaming numbers are definitely taking a hit with there being no shows.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder to promote. I mean, I was having this conversation the other day where it's like, I can't think of that many real breakout artists of 2020. There's a couple in LA, obviously. You mentioned Blue Bucks and Blast is doing well out of LA. There's a couple other ones, but there really hasn't been. You think of like I'm thinking of like really since like DaBaby or something. Like an artist that kind of took over. The pop culture state of hip hop. When you think of the class of 2020, it's almost like a blank slate.
I think about this all the time. Like who are artists of 2020? It's it's so weird to think about. Well, it just really makes you like rethink the whole music ecosystem, right? And like how and why we tap into artists in this day and age, and what that momentum is fueled by. Like, I think we will. I think we're still in like an. I'm sorry, Jeff. I totally cut you off.
Oh, no.
Like, I think
that's what a Zoom panel is for.
I think we're like very much still in this like incubation period. I have conversations all the time about art that people are making in music, and I just think we're still like very early on until we see like the wave of creativity that's being like kind of just concocted right now in these circumstances. But the traditional ways in terms of how art has been inspired and creative, produced, put out, consumed, that's all disrupted right now. So there is this weird, just this weird gap. You know, it's just strange to think there's like the year without hit artists, right?
Yeah. I also, maybe if you guys want to join in with this, it's like, it feels like kind of a profoundly uninspiring time in a lot of respects. I mean, obviously you have the darkness of the political situation and internally and emotionally, and obviously artists are going to create, but I think so much of art is really, and you know, music and culture really comes from the interplay of ideas that comes from being like outside. You know, I think of always like the low end theory world in Los Angeles, which to me is one of the most vibrant communities I've seen in my time in journalism. And that was, you know, everyone's like, oh, the internet is going to make it so people can just connect and it's cool. Like, you know, anyone can name 20, 30, 40 classic albums that, you know, people traded files or whatever, but there is that sense of community that's gone. And I don't know, do you guys think that there will be kind of a redoubled desire for community after this? I mean, do you think there will be a positive thing when we're out on the other side in, you know, probably 2029, 2030? Mm-hmm. Or next?
I think it's definitely helping maybe create some type of geographical boundaries because of what's going on. So it's like, as far as technology, you can just go wherever you want to go and reach wherever you want to reach. But I think as far as people being forced to create communities, I think those things is gonna spur things, because all you could do now is really make music and work with people. But I agree as far as the motivation right now and not being able to see records and break records in the world. I think that's, you see an effect of that with a lot of, I think, pop artists and bigger artists, where you can't run into the music like you used to when you was outside. Like if a hit, you can't escape a hit. But right now you can escape a hit. You know, you can stay in your house and because you got to, so you're not going to the clubs, you're not doing things where you could feel maybe a record like Tootsie Slide or something like that. I think probably would have did better with, you know, without a pandemic, because the only record that I hear now is like the St. John's record, Roses, the fast version of it, because it was old. It was like before pandemic happened, it was already moving. Like certain records that might have carried over, it's still, you know, they got a big advantage, because I haven't seen no new records come out that really, you know, stamped the summer or did anything. Like nobody even thought about a summer record. We just forgot about it. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just like, you know, this one of the years where we just default, okay, let's move on. What's next year? A lot of things is going to be blank when we go back to 2020, because we didn't get a chance to experience it the way we usually do. So I think that part of it is a big, you know, hurts a lot. And with the DJs, of course, like that's places like Vegas and places like that was where records and all these residencies. I'm seeing Wiz Khalifa Billboard still 2020 residency. I'm seeing that still there. Like that been there like all year, just right there on top of Intelligentsia, you know, on Hollywood. And it's like, dang, he didn't even get a chance. I wonder if he even did 1 month of that before it turned into, you know, let's see. I think Usher announced he's gonna, you know, he announced a residency in sometime July 21. Yeah. So that's the only thing I heard of anybody like stepping out in the way of seeing hope again. So that's like a whole year away.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like that? I mean, like, obviously this is all speculative, but I mean, is there any hope of like a Coachella 2021 or like a Lollapalooza or whatever festival, you know, like, is that even, have you been hearing anything on that end, whether that's even feasible, or is it just like kind of just shrug your shoulders and hope for the best? I mean, because obviously these are things that take forever to plan. You can't just like, you can't just get a vaccine in like March and be like, all right, we got 3 weeks, like build 500 installations,
Wrap it together. Yeah.
No, I definitely just kind of shrug my shoulders and hope for the best. I personally don't see it happening. I know, Rolling Loud announced, a Portugal festival. I could see more international or like more festivals happening outside of the U.S. But aside from that, it is kind of like a shrug your shoulders and hope for the best for stuff to happen here locally.
Yeah, that's too big, and it's I can see the Usher thing because it's more controlled. I can see, and they could just take temperatures, hotel, a couple thousand people, and it's something you could do. But when everybody's all over the place in the seats, and so they probably could do something in that capacity. But with the way the environment is and those things, I don't know if they might go for another video or something. I don't know if it might be another year of that because they didn't get a chance to take advantage of that because they was like right on, like soon as South by and Coachella was the first things to go as far as cancellation and being hit by the corona. So they didn't get a chance to do what other award shows did when they start, filming these performances and putting them on TV and doing things like that, to where I could see something like that happening because those performances, as long as you got a platform to show them, I think people would be interested in seeing these type of people no matter what. People would love to see Frank Ocean right now on something. I don't care if it was on TV, on streaming, on YouTube. I think still those type of performances in a controlled environment, I think people would still pay to see online. I think so. I think still another year of that.
Yeah, I don't see everything going back to normal to like 2022 in like my best guess. Like I don't think 2021, especially in California, I feel like, I don't think there's going to be any type of like big shows in like 2021. At least, like you guys said, until like the vaccine and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm curious too, and this is maybe something you guys can weigh in on how like culture will be changed. Like, obviously everything is cyclical, right? So I mean, even if culture has changed, it'll change for a year or two. But you can already kind of see some of the tea leaves, right, about how everyone is definitely more broke. I remember like in the late 2000s, rap kind of changed a little. I mean, obviously Jeezy put out his Recession album that kind of stands out, but rap was kind of different. It shifted away from the kind of bawling mentality that had kind of characterized it for almost a decade previously. Now, a lot of the records you see are almost like, I imagine it's going to be a little more grimy, a little more raw. I don't see the because it's. I mean, this will be a financial. I mean, I was having this conversation recently about even someone like Future, right? I'm sure Future is fine right now, but somebody like Future had to be probably making millions of dollars a year on the road, just playing all these shows or spot dates or any huge artist, right? And all of a sudden you don't plan for that. No one planned, okay, well, I'm going to have to all of a sudden go from, several $1 million I'm planning on to zero. And, obviously a lot of labels don't pay very often, or, the artist is, in debt from, advances or whatever. I mean, yeah. How do you think that looks for artists on that front? Maybe hip hop, you could kind of talk about that, obviously, because you've kind of been in all kind of facets of the label world for a long time, management as well.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely hurt because, like you said, touring was the backbone. That was the thing that most artists hung their hat on and paid the bills with, being that the music thing was so up and down, and who knows when the record was coming, and especially when we're looking at the micro payments of streaming. So touring was that, that payday, that pick up the bag, and in all of those terminologies. So I think most people's lifestyle was based on that.
Yeah.
Like the way they live and a lot of those things. So that's coming to effect. I mean, Wale was the first one to really, mention it because he just had an album that came out, had a #1 record. He might have had a #1 record right when the pandemic hit. So I think he was on tour. So with Griselda, we just finished tour, like our last date. Because Westside had Corona, and that basically because our tour was so close to that, like everything was over. The last day at the Novo was like, I was afraid to go.
Yeah.
So it was still during that time of you know, so we just was lucky enough to finish, so we didn't have probably another tour the next year.
Yeah.
Because of that. But the timing of people records who just came out and think, you know, promo tours and just being able to just move around and see people, that part, and as far as how that make into the finances of an artist is it's the biggest chunk at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's the biggest chunk of their money. So I can see a lot of them rethinking things and looking at other ways to invest, and hopefully is the right way and stuff like that. But they definitely got to find ways to leverage, like the ones who leverage their brands and doing cool things, like all Travis Scott been doing is collaborations the whole pandemic. He just been dropping Jordans and burgers and shit like that. And and he been cool, you know what I mean, as far as, but that's what, you know, he built his brand up like that from day one to really, you know, to have that type of value. But some guys just really make money from pounding the pavement.
Yeah.
And their whole thing is the cycle of an album, then a tour, the album, then a tour, the album, and a tour. And now they just, you know, recording. They already got too much songs as it is. Most of these artists, like, they don't need to be in the studio. They need to be in that cycle so they can, you know, get it out, move on to the next one and figure it out, to where now they just, you know, a lot of them going to get a lot of, not writer's block, but, you know, that form of, how do I get back, you know, back into it after, you know, recorded so many songs and built up that body of work beyond, you know, what you probably could spoon feed people nowadays, because there's already a crowded market and everything. So maybe this is a good thing, just letting people reset, letting things kind of calm down. But I know for the artists, it's nothing good. I can't see too much.
What about on the label end? How do you think, you know, a lot of you guys have label? I think almost everybody on the panel, except Andrew, probably has a label. And then feel free to chime in also, Andrew. How do you feel this affects labels? You know, because especially the indie labels, because the major labels, I mean, let's be honest, they're just gonna, I mean, I'm sure it takes a hit because they have 360 deals. They're not getting show money the same way that they were. Streaming's probably down a little bit, but they're probably okay. Most major labels, I assume, are probably okay. I mean, streaming's got to be the best thing that ever happened to them, because all of a sudden you don't have any production costs. You don't have to make a physical product. You're just getting money in constantly off streaming. So, you know, how do you think it affects an indie label?
I think I keep asking myself, like, when I hear a song, like, how would this do if outside was open, if the clubs were open, if, you know, we can go here, we can go there. And, you know, it's just a big question mark. Like, you know, I feel like, you know, there's been a lot of dope records, you know, in LA that have came out. Like Cypress dropped like a bunch of dope records that, like, part of, like, I'm sure the plan was like, we're playing this in the club, you know, we're playing this here, we're, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So I feel like that's the way indie record labels are getting affected, because, you know, we might be sitting on a hit, but, you know, due to the circumstances, they're not going to take off in the same way that they probably would have.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go.
No, I agree with Vic. I feel like labels are now really trying to get into the creative side of things. Music videos, I'm seeing a lot of artists and a lot of labels kind of invest in. I was just at a video shoot yesterday, and it was probably one of the first video shoots that I've seen some of my colleagues have with like a better budget than they did back when things were open. So for indie labels, I don't know, everything is pretty much situational, but I'm starting to see a lot of people like kind of go back to the drawing board and just, you know, everybody's adjusting to what's going on right now.
I mean, and the marketing obviously changes, right? There's less point, you know, it's bizarre, right? Because how do you promote a record when you have all these tried and true ways of, you know, say you're breaking a record in the South, well, right? Like, obviously there are, you know, a lot of the clubs in the South, there's this network of DJs where you promote it to, you know, online people are here, but, you know, people don't necessarily want to listen to music the same way. I'm sure Griselda is one of the artists where it's again, it's interior, you know, you're like walking around, it's like a personal thing. They're not making, I feel like that's the kind of music that, and I've noticed a ton of people are still talking about Griselda this year.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I think the artists with followings, with like fan bases and cult followings, still will have a better chance because they can still, you know, do things, release merch, release music, do a lot more personal things at a time like now, to where like the bigger artists still need that to rail up and get a project going. But as the major labels, I see they doing a lot more a lot of features, like artists is doing songs with each artist, like a lot of collaboration, the baby and the baby and Rowdy and the baby and the baby and Rowdy, you know, and it's a lot of to where they play in that game, because that's a streaming game as far as the recognition and, oh, he's on the song with him, or Future's on the song with him, and now they could constantly keep the ball rolling, keep new music out without having to launch a whole new record. And they doing a deluxe thing, added new songs to an old record. So it's not like a whole new cycle, but they're stretching it out a lot more and still focusing on the TikTok stuff and things of that nature. So I think major labels are still cool with that. They still love those platforms. I think they still do a lot for them. But the traditional thing, so if anything happens on the social media or any of those apps, I think they're going extra heavy on, because the other things is not there like they used to be.
Yeah, the meme pages are booming right now.
Yeah, I think Warner just bought one of the companies, right? Then they buy
the Quan.
I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, the Quan.
Yeah, so they're really doubling down, I think, on just memes and
digital marketing.
Digital marketing, yep, 100%.
I was gonna say, you mentioned TikTok. Obviously, that's kind of it's not pandemic related, but you know, maybe it is because people are inside more, so they're gonna make more TikTok. So I guess you probably can make the case it is. How do you feel something like TikTok is? You know, like I remember, I think it might have been South by Southwest, even 2019 was like the first time I'd really heard of TikTok, or you know, I didn't know what it was. I'd heard the name. I was like, what the fuck is TikTok? And now it's...
No, they were giving away fanny packs at the Fader for it, I remember.
And now look at them. And not even exist because they might have to get sold by, like, yeah. How has TikTok really changed? You know, I mean, obviously music, the history of music is the history of technology in a lot of respects. I think you can track it in so many ways.
100%.
Is the, you know, it feels to me, and, you know, feel free to chime in, that everything becomes more bite-sized, right? Like to paraphrase Roman and Succession, it's all these morsels, right? And it becomes more and more of that. And TikTok to me strikes me as like, okay, like obviously with Vine, but like Vine wasn't necessarily breaking records to the same extent. Look at Sada Baby, right? For instance, you know, guys out there listening don't know Sada Baby. You're probably gonna hear of him via TikTok, even though he's been kind of arguably one of the best rappers alive. I mean, not even arguably, he's definitely been the best rappers alive for the past 2 years. And now he's gonna cross over to basically white middle America because of a TikTok song.
Whole lot of choppers.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just very weird to think like 13-year-olds in Iowa are going to be like doing a baby dance, which like it's like, wow.
Yeah. Nah, the platforms definitely being able to take advantage of technology is like you said, that's always been the key. Just like who could do it. That's why the club music has always been so prominent, because that's been something that's hard to duplicate, that social experience and that element, you know, and anywhere else. But with, you know, Fortnite as well, I forgot Travis did that as well, like early pandemic, and kind of created another element. Like we've been seeing it with the video games and all of those things, but with movies not being here, which was another element of syncs and ways to break songs. So now we don't have that. So the last thing, so there haven't been no real TV, film, you know, so all the outlets got affected at the same time.
Yeah,
so
no performance royalties.
Yeah, no performance. So whatever's left, which happens to be Fortnite, TikTok, live, to where most of the things, you know, most of the artists found, I guess you could say, secondary income with, with just Instagram. Just Fat Joe created a whole new show. Everybody that had created, different, tapped into different things during the quarantine, skills they probably didn't realize they had. So I think, that part of what they brand is worth, which they didn't realize. So those things happened, and some cases end up going away at the same time with people like Tory. He built it all the way up and got it all, and lost it all. But at one time he was like winning the whole quarantine thing as far as with his radio show and everything. And D-Nice did a great job. So for some people, it's finding the niche and ways to flip it and do what they could do. But for the most part, and looking at artists that I'm working with, is they're still trying to figure out the temperature and play it by ear as far as when they really gonna turn it up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No. I was going to ask, one of the things I wanted to talk about is sort of the nature of ecosystems. It's something I think about a lot. And like, I feel right now, and this is not only a pandemic thing, this is something that I've noticed been happening for about the last 5 years prior, right? Where it's all these ecosystems, and I think of them as almost 20th century ecosystems, right? That have historically propped up everything to do with music and culture at large, right? We're talking the DIY venue that has got priced out by gentrification and rising rents, and all these people come in that want to kind of profit off the culture, but don't necessarily want or profit or even be a part of it, but don't necessarily, they're not building it from the ground up and then it's gone and everyone's kind of shrugging their shoulders. Or say something like, I think about the Alt Weekly, of course, right? Which is where I kind of got my start, and that's sort of why theLAnd kind of exists in a way, because the LA Weekly got bought by basically a bunch of Trumpist ghouls from Orange County. They shut it down, but that's been something that's happened all across the country. There are very few Alt Weeklies left. And obviously one of the things when I first met Vic was because he was one of the really one of the only blogs in LA, and still really is one of the only blogs in LA to do the, to chronicle the culture and break new artists. And there's less of an incentive, I think, right now for a publication to even break a new artist, because music discovery doesn't get clicks, right? Everything is this click-based economy, and that extends basically from TikTok to streaming to journalism. Maybe Andrea, you could take this. How do you feel the death of, because obviously of the Culture Journalism podcast as well, that's sort of helping to fill the void. How do you feel that the death of these parts of the ecosystems affect the music world?
Yeah, this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and that Emily, my co-host, and I talk about a lot. I'm just trying to think of like what aspect to even start on. Sorry, maybe one of you guys have want to jump in with something more, but
or like the ecosystem, she was saying, basically.
I mean, it's all, they're all so tied up together that I mean this is like, I guess it should be noted that like this is also a lot of just kind of accelerating like what these ecosystems were already going through.
Yeah, right.
Like even, and I think we actually talked about this on the episode, Jeff, like even before well before this, just like finding, just writing about like some artist that you just care about that has like 500 followers and you think they're worthy of popping off, like that. I haven't gotten paid to do something like that in years,
Mm-hmm.
It's done. Yeah, I think about it,
stuff like that, but like I won't get paid for it. You know what I mean? Or it'll be like a
very
here or there.
Yeah. No, totally.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen this a lot where it's like, I've been following, about the case of Draco the Ruler. It's a big thing close to my heart. Incredible. If you don't know, if you're listening, incredible rapper, grew up in the 100 section, actually where Dijon Kizzy was murdered about a week ago. Draco was shot on that same intersection. Incredible rapper from South Central. He's been incarcerated for the last 2.5 years, and every member of his rap crew was incarcerated. Basically, it's a long story, but it's due to a really convoluted Sheriff's Department, Los Angeles County District Attorney conspiracy. Draco's been acquitted of murder charges, but they're still trying him on these really kind of basically racist gang conspiracy laws. And, I think about like someone like that who we've been able, through all the writing, he's now getting coverage, which is great. But then and needed. But then I think about all these other artists. You know, there's a rapper named Briss from Sacramento, brilliant young artist that got shot and murdered. There's nothing on him. You know, there's all these great rising talents in hip hop. You know, and in all genres, really, like, you know, band, especially like, you know, rock really needs that too, because hip hop almost has this infrastructure of, you know, whether it's like, you know, a Rosecrans or like a Say Cheese or like, you know, No Jumper gives a lot of artists like a chance. You know, there's these YouTube pages like that. And really in rock music, it doesn't exist the same way. You know, I don't know. I don't know how a band, I mean, how do you break a band without, or a rapper without kind of the YouTube virality, the meme virality? How does that happen anymore?
Right. I don't know. I think that what's really happening is that it's so many numbers available for them to see, like in the big data, you know, word of it. So they go into that because they would rather do that. They'd rather, you know, go with numbers. That's what they always did, but it never came as clear and as the numbers are now. Like, oh, this is what he's doing. This is where they doing him at. This is what's happening. Like they had SoundScan, which came around in probably like 91, 90, something like that. And that changed the game for hip hop because they seen hip hop real numbers. It wasn't a report of people saying, oh, I sold 100 of these. I sold 20 of these. So it's like, oh no, we see SoundScan, we're looking at it. Wow, we sold that much in Sacramento. We didn't even know people in Sacramento like hip hop. So that took it to a next level where they was able to focus on what it is. And now that everything is basically, everything that happens musically is calculated nowadays. Like it's not a activity or experience that you're having that's not being calculated. So it's like, they know when you're buying a record, they know when you're listening to it, they know where, they know what time. So a label would rather just take that information and bank on that and just sign things based on that. Oh, this is what it's already doing. This is what it could do. Okay, cool. And they just kind of go with more formulas and more things of that nature. And I think that's what hurts the blogs and the journalists. And back in the days, you had magazines that if you was on a certain radio show or certain, you know, it was these windows that if you was able to get on this mixtape, it was a opportunity for you. And then they felt like, oh, we want to sign this guy because he's on this person's album. That was enough. That was a big enough stamp to be like, okay, he's already halfway there. 1 million people know who he is. So it's the same thing where they see somebody in Detroit or somebody happening. They wouldn't really pay attention to them musically or get into who they are or how it got there. They just know the numbers is there. And now they take in, I guess that's what happened with Pump. Lil Pump is giving a whole bunch of money because he had, the numbers was there. And they just figured like, hey, this gotta be bigger. It can only get bigger. Look, the kids love him. And they just left the music out of the, you know, out of the question. And they didn't never make that better. They didn't focus on it. They just thought, hey, we buying into this. The fans is there. It's there. And it didn't last long. So I think that it's showing as they go after the number that you can't just go straight numbers. You got to have some kind of balance of people with ears and heart and feel for the music and people who knows, you know, these areas and have a special, you know, understanding of the history of an area like Rosecrans Ave, like Barber, like they had up in Chicago, you know, like they had with Fake Shore Drive, like in y'all name represent where y'all from. So it's like, you know what I mean? I remember having to go to Rosecrans just to go to VIP, just to buy a Daz album, you know, and it was like, and that was the only place in the world I think that had it. And that's how difficult it was at a time to be able to, you know, to have to participate in an artist's career, to where now it's like, oh, I pick up my phone, cool, you know, I follow them, I listen to a song or two, okay, I'm a fan, I'm there. So the whole threshold of, you know, being involved is so, it's basically non-existent at this point.
The relationship with it.
Yeah, so I think it's
much more consumptive.
Yeah, so I think the ecosystem is all real numbers and algorithms.
It's like in everything. I hate that, not to be like one of these like Luddites like screaming at the system, but I hate that in sports too. It makes it like you know, it's like, look, I'm an NBA junkie. Like when the moment is over, I'm going to watch the Clipper game, even though I'm a Lakers fan, but whatever.
Yeah, my Celtics just lost, so I'm kind of sitting here trying to hold it all in. But
well, at least the Lakers are looking pretty good, so I'm pretty happy about that. Sorry. Yeah. Can't root for the Celtics by by upbringing, but yeah, no.
You said it's all algorithm. You said sports as well.
Everything is like I think maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think like they're even like the basketball has changed because of everyone realized, okay, you can hit a 3 in the corner and that's a really high percentage shot, and so like now basketball just becomes a series of it's also zone defense coming in, but it's a series of driving kicks and 3-pointers in the corner.
It becomes a math problem. Yeah,
exactly right, and that I think music is almost like kind of becoming like that too. It's right. I'll give you like I'm curious actually what any of you guys think. I've been thinking a lot. I'm writing a piece about Vanilla Ice. Long story, but it's the 30-year anniversary of Vanilla Ice like coming out, right? And obviously a big part of that was the mainstreaming of hip hop, and the gatekeepers kind of united to say no more. You could be this populist phenomenon, whether that's good or bad. But like one of the things about him that everyone said was, oh, he's this copycat. Which, to a degree, he was not you know what I mean? It was very derivative of a Tone Loc, a Young MC, a Hammer, right? Like this kind of pop rap. But now I feel like and this is something that I think is very much based on the algorithm and streaming, and maybe we can talk about this a little bit, but how creativity kind of when it becomes quantified, it loses something, right? Because I hear all these artists now, and it's nothing taking out the other artists, but they like it used to be. And like Hop, you came up in this, and it's like if you sounded like another artist, forget it. Like you couldn't, you had to get your own style, and that's been gone for a long time. But now it's kind of like I think about the Young Thug school in Atlanta, right, where it's like how many rappers, and it's in LA. There's rappers in LA that sound like Young Thug. There's rappers in Chicago that sound like Young Thug. There are rappers in every city that sound like Young Thug, and they're very successful because it's like recommended if you like Young Thug rapper. How do you feel like this kind of has changed the face of music, and where do you see it going in the future? Anyone feel free to jump in.
Well, I think like you said, I think it's kind of like just algorithm based a lot, and kind of like a series of math problems. I don't think it's like a coincidence that Lil Baby, DaBaby, anybody with baby in their name like started to blow up around the same time. Sada Baby. Yeah. I think that's due to algorithms. Like obviously their music is dope, but like when you type in DaBaby and Sada Baby comes up because it's 2 letters away from that, then it says, oh, did you mean Little Baby? And then you might listen to all of them. You're like, wait, which one is it? Which one's the best baby? Like, you know what I mean? And I think that's a real thing.
Who's the best baby? For who's your favorite baby?
Oh man, it's probably a tie between Lil Baby and Sada Baby.
Yeah, Lil Baby. I say Lil Baby.
Yeah, Lil Baby.
Yeah, Lil Baby too.
I'm a Sada Baby.
Yeah.
You just say one of the best rappers living. So.
Yeah.
Baby.
But yeah, like I said, I think it's a series of like math problems like that where algorithms pick up, and now like you said, like a Young Thug, and then Gunna and like Lil Baby kind of sounded alike, and they both blew up at the same time because they're like, I like this music.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
They all kind of sound.
Yeah.
I like them enough, but it just is how like I mean even like Roddy Ricch I think becoming this huge superstar. Nothing against him, he's obviously a very talented guy, and The Box is an incredible song. But when I hear Roddy Ricch, I don't hear someone where I'm like, oh, that's the new sound, right? Like it feels like, and that's okay because you could say that same thing about Young Thug, right? That's a tweak on the Lil Wayne kind of template. But
Future on Wayne, got you.
Yeah, but yeah, I wonder if if a new I mean, obviously, like certain things are going to slip through, right? Like I mean, genius is going to find its way, but I do wonder. I mean, it's always been the music business, though, I suppose, right? It's always
I agree. Yeah,
marketing.
Because I think you need a little bit of both because you can't come completely left.
Yeah, I
don't think people are gonna really get it if you so too original.
Yeah.
So sometimes you gotta back your way in, and sometimes a lot of people think that's what people like, and sometimes a lot of people can't get past that. The fact that, oh, this is what they're listening to, this is what they like. Okay, cool. And, you know, trying that new thing and being a different artist is not as easy as it looks.
Totally.
So, and getting that hit and getting that one record, you know, a lot of times come because that sound is easy to do. It is simple. It is like all the artists you mentioned with the Vanilla Ice sound. It was, you know, it's not hard to do a song like Young MC, Tone Loc, or MC Hammer.
Yeah.
That's not, you know, it's a type of record. It's a, you know, and it's a type of record that worked. And these are the same way. It's the melodies, the elements of it, the repetitive, you know, the things that's in trap that Young Thug took to the next level and created a whole new language with is the one that kids understand nowadays. Like that part of it, to where somebody rapping real simple is almost like, what's going on? Like, and it is funny that sometimes I will listen to older hip hop and new hip hop, and new hip hop, old hip hop would sound simple to me sometimes. Like, oh, this is, you know, to a degree of difficulty on a lot of the things that people, you know, give them slack for is, to me, a lot harder to do. And, you know, to constantly do what Young Thug is doing, song after song after song, rather than somebody who flow might be a little more elementary. Maybe they say a little more things that have some substance to it. But as far as, you know, just the melodicness and the changing of flows like 5 times per verse and things of that nature, where some artists would never change flows at once. These guys is just
on the whole album,
jumping all over the place. Yeah, never whole career. Nah, but but I think that part of it, you know, it's a sound. It makes sense. That's what happens with genres. You know, they mimic and kind of blend into each other until somebody else comes with a different twist to it or a different variation of it, and then that'll be the next thing. But I agree, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen anything since Young Thug.
Yeah, where I was like, well, it's like there's that famous quote about art, and it says, all original things look ugly at first, right? And the first time you hear like Young Thug, you're just like, like, and then you're like, no, this is amazing, right? And Future was the same way to me, you know. And of course I wonder, like, am I, you know, it's like the Simpsons gif where it's like, am I getting old, or is it the kids, you know, or like Principal Skinner, you know, that I mangled, but you get the gist, everyone. But or it's like, you know, not to pick on it, but it's like probably the biggest song of this year is probably the What's Poppin' song, right? And or, you know, that, or maybe WAP, but those would strike me as the What's Popping song's already on the radio. It's everywhere, you know, that and the remix. And that to me is just so weird, because that song could have came out at any point in the last 5 years. And I think about hip hop in the 90s, let's say, right, where it's like every year is different, right? 1990 and 1991 are very different years. And 1992 is a very different year because Dre drops The Chronic, and then everything changes. And then 93, Wu-Tang comes out. So forget it. Then 94, it's Nas, Illmatic, you know, Biggie. It's very different. You know, Mobb Deep or 95. Like it's a very different changing.
97 after 97 is Puffy, so it's like a whole thing. Then DMX in 99, Eminem. So now you're right. It was a whole roller coaster ride throughout the 90s as far as the type of music you was going through, the different genres. Because you started in the 90s with Death Row, I guess, NWA, you know, right around that.
Tribe is like, you know what I mean? The first Tribe album, I think, is like 1990, maybe, you know.
Right. But as far as like commercial was like considered around nothing but a G thing. Yeah. Like that was like kind of kicked the door open as far as that. Then you had the Tupac phases and stuff like that. But, you know, then ending with, I could say, DMX going into like Eminem and stuff like that. And it just kind of leaving New York after that, and ain't been back since. You know, it's fun. The South.
It was going to be with Pop Smoke.
Pop Smoke, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, but even that came like around sonically from somewhere else. So it's still, you know, kind of like the hip hop reversing itself, like in a way, kind of like where New York is a new city now for that sound, to where that sound been everywhere else. Been Chicago, been overseas, been in Atlanta, even LA to some extent, and then it's finally back in New York, and it's like, excited, and it's a whole new thing, and it's, you know, so that was like I guess you could say like a backwards thing that was working in the favor of him at the time. So I think that definitely was a good movement, because Atlanta is just the same storylines, I feel, at this point, like the artists and where they from and the cities, to where it's a new city is definitely could help, like, you know, with a sound. Yeah, I think that could be
I mean, I think
that might happen next at a time like now.
I mean, I think people forget, I think that creativity kind of ebbs and flows, especially for different cities. So there are good periods and there are bad periods in music. I mean, it's like we think it's always good, but, you know, like I always think about the late 2000s, that kind of was a dry spell for rap. Like, it just wasn't that interesting. And then all of a sudden you have, you know, T, Odd Future, whomever, like, you know, Migos, Thug, you know, all these things kind of popping up in the early 2010s to mid 2010s that kind of change it. And then, you know, you know, and that's, I think, what could be potentially interesting about this era. It's like, you know, as you said, it's a reset. You know, I was going to move on, you know, because, like, well, you know, start on the last, you know, part of the show. Thanks for everyone still tuning in. It's going to go to kind of, what do you guys want to see happen? Like, what would you like to see happen, you know, coming out of this? Like, how would you like to see, you know, we think of this as kind of, this is like, definitely, as Andrea mentioned at the beginning, it's an extinction level event to some degree, but, you know, life will go on. You know, there will be some form of a culture again, you know, unless, like, well, you never know. We'll see what happens in November, but theoretically, you know, we'll be out of this and hope at most a year. Yeah. What do you know, I'd love for you guys each to talk about, you know, what are your hopes for, you know, going forward when we come on the other side of this?
Well, I guess let me just like clarify when I said extinction level. You know, I was referring to like the live music independent space specifically, but I think this is like an unbelievable time for creativity. I'm really, I mean, like all the obvious like fears and apprehensions we have about the future and the pragmatic side, and like, you know, businesses still being able to stay open. Like, of course, that's uncertain, that's scary. But I mean, I think it's corny, but, you know, it's like the Renaissance came after the plague, right? And I think what we're seeing right now, the flip side of like all the gnarly stuff, is that you're seeing, like, for example, the separation of music from industry. And like, it's not the music industry anymore. I think everybody's really being forced to like focus on like, what is it about music that excites us, that motivates us, that brings us together, that like reps our hometowns, you know? And we're all being forced to think so much more carefully about who we spend our time with and how right now, that I can't see that not then spilling over into the kind of art we make. And, you know, we were talking about ecosystems before too. I think the same thing applies to like any creative field. You're seeing the separation of journalism and media from media industry. You're seeing the separation of, you know, books from industry, you know, publishing from industry, like, just because we're also having to find all these creative workarounds right now. And like, technology is actually amazing for anything collective right now. I mean, hello, look at what we're doing. I wouldn't have started my podcast probably, like, honestly, if it hadn't been for the pandemic. I just wouldn't have, I wouldn't have had like the balls, honestly, to say like, fuck it, I'm gonna do it. And I mean, I'm also like making music and doing like creative art things on the side, which again, like, is not something I think I would have tried doing really in earnest, or had follow through on, had this not happened. And that's just me, you know. I'm a journalist. So for people that are actually like really living deeply, you know, in these creative spaces and in the music, I think we're gonna see a rediscovery of music as a language and as community.
Right.
It's just going to look different than we're used to.
I guess I'll go. I think that what I would like to see. What I like to see is, I guess, maybe hopefully some corporate capitalists kind of step back a little bit, because it ain't making as much money, and leave it in the hands of like the artists creatively and things of that nature. I think that will kind of like a restart in that way, to where everything became so corporate and so number based and things of that nature, to where most followings or movements is good at that infancy level, and then it gets to the point where they turn it into something else and it get corrupted and it's all over the place, and the people that loved it don't love it no more. So hopefully a lot of the bands and movements could not stay small longer, but at least grow the right way and not kind of just blow up and not blow up. So I think a lot of artists are going to have a lot more control over their careers in the new time, because of, you know, you're not dealing with all these promoters and agents. So now if they're going to do a show, it's probably going to be with one digital company that's going to give them a lot of money or something like that. So now they got to go figure out what they're going to do with merch. Now they got to be creative and figure out ways to utilize that fan base that they amassed over however many years. So now it's like, how do I Patreon? Do I do this? Do I do podcasts? Do I turn these guys into a club? You know, just so many different ways for them to turn their own career into a business and not depend on record labels or corporations, because I think those things is taking the biggest hit, being that they can't, you know, reach the masses like they want to. They can't have the big tours. So it kind of works in the favor of the smaller artists who have truer fan base and who's making music that really hits hard. It hits, you know, like hit the right notes. It's as far as, you know, those type of artists, I think it's going to be valued more, to where now the artist that's bigger, a lot of those other things don't come with it. So if you got somebody that you got a 360 with, you can't even probably going to get 180 at this point. So a lot of those things, you know, will make an artist feel like, okay, I need to take things into my own hands. And technology, like you said, is a beautiful thing right now, and it's in the favor of the creatives. You know, you could upload your podcast right now. You can upload your music now. There's so many things that artists could do now. So hopefully this is the time where artists will come together and pool together and start doing things on their own, or I mean together, not to say on their own individually, but, you know, just utilizing each other's resources and what's out there. I still think it's a bright time for music and creative overall once we get out of this, because there's so much going on right now that it's, you know, kind of felt like, I guess, what it was during the civil rights time, because we didn't even get into all of those things that's going on top of the pandemic, on top of, you know, capitalism, and, you know, so many different layers of what music is under, that I think it always been a voice for all of those things. So I think that's going to be what I hope to see, just some interesting music from the times, and some artists benefit from it.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. You guys pretty much hit it. You know, community, unity, and collaboration. Definitely want to see more collaboration going forward. Not just within, you know, one region, but you know, collaborations across the coast, down south, all the way to the East Coast. I definitely want to see more collaboration on. I mean, that's kind of what I've been doing a little more so with my time in the studio. This is kind of not forced me, but it's put me in a position to be open to a lot more collaboration, just, you know, a lot of unity, a lot of growth, and just keep moving forward for the most part.
Yeah, I think my greatest hope with all of, you know, what's gone on and this is that we're just like trimming the fat off of like hip hop and like the industry, and like kind of like hip hop said, that it's like now there might not be as much money, and the people that were solely in it for the money like go back to, you know, making like rock music, or go back to making, you know, whatever they're making, and like all the bullshit is just like cut the fuck out. Like you see like somebody like 6ix9ine is like, you know, his career is tanking, you know, because people don't want to hear that bullshit anymore. They don't want to, you know, support somebody that puts other people in prison when everybody's going, you know, being wrongfully, you know, imprisoned, and, you know, there's people being, you know, shot for no reason, unarmed. And then you're like, wait a minute, I don't want to fucking support any of this type of bullshit. You know, I want to hear something reflective of the times. You know, I want to hear people, you know, doing better for themselves, doing better for the community, you know, pushing forward. I think we've already kind of seen some things of like, you know, how hip hop is like changing and rolling out certain things, like that Jay-Z and Pharrell video, you know, where it just highlighted a bunch of like really dope Black entrepreneurs. And I thought that was like amazing and inspiring, you know, in the current climate. Like if they would have had that song, and who knows if that idea would have came up, you know, because there's such a focus on like community and unity now. So I hope that continues. I hope a lot of collaboration continues, and just like all the bullshit is just like left in 2020.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go down to I'm gonna ask 2 more questions, and then, you know, if anyone listening wants to ask a question in the chat, feel free to kind of type that in at the end of it, and we can, you know, answer those. So I guess the first one, my first question really is, what about Los Angeles? Obviously, we're all living here. This is theLAnd is For Locals by Locals magazine, and you know, obviously, you know, I think everybody except you, Hop, has grown up in LA, but we very much, you're one of the people we definitely welcome to LA, because
You can come to LA, yeah.
They're like, all right, fuck New York, we got hip hop.
Who did we trade for hip hop?
Yeah.
It was a good trade. I just want to know.
Yeah, totally. It's like just a great free. Yeah. Yeah. So how do you feel this is going to affect LA? You know, maybe I can just start rambling and then someone can take it from there. I mean, for me, in my opinion, I think, you know, Vic, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think I texted you guys earlier. I was like, you know, when we come back with a Don't Come to LA thing next year, it's not going to necessarily, you know, our first of all, like we were working with a company like Red Bull. Red Bull's funds are obviously, they had a massive corporate restructure. Places like that, you know, it's different now. You're not going to be able to rely, kind of as Hoppy, you were saying, like the corporate patronage that people had relied on, which means it's necessarily going to be kind of grimier, more outlaw. There's going to be a ton of vacancies in the city. I mean, everyone, it was funny, there were all these New York is dead things where it's like, that's actually, when you're getting all these big New York is dead think pieces, that's actually great for a city, kind of, because then it means that like all the people that shouldn't have been there are leaving. And LA, you know, I think a lot of people leave. There's going to be a lot of vacancies. It'll almost have more of a, I would imagine, like a 70s vibe, kind of, which obviously was so creatively fertile. You know, hip hop was born from the 70s, punk was born from the 70s, and it was kind of because, you know, partially because there was room for it. You know, like people made creative, out of necessity, people created. And I mean, that would be my hope for sure. And I think, you know, this, I imagine it will be kind of grimier, more raw coming after this, because people are not going to have as much money. Like, you know, I can't help but even see something like the Kardashians ending, right? They're certainly not going anywhere, but that feels very much like a sign of the times, right? Like that era is sort of over. And, you know, in terms of LA, you know, how do you guys see it?
The end of like aspirational FOMO decadence, you know?
Totally, yeah. Like, who wants that? Like, I read an essay earlier about, like, you know, the death of kind of the celebrity, where people, like, you see celebrities during the pandemic and you're like, honestly, fuck these people. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Get the guillotine out. And that's a different time than it was, let's even 5-10 years ago, where you're like, I don't want to be like those people. Now it just almost seems out of touch. So I don't know if you guys want to, you know, jump in or. Right.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, sort of to what you were just saying about like the symbolic end of the Kardashians. I mean, I was supposed to do a piece, I think, for the LA Times at Coachella this year, where I shadowed an influencer behind the scenes. Like my idea, like because I've always been fascinated by like the intersection of Coachella that started as this subcultural thing, then actually being something that was part and parcel to influencer culture. So, you know, I wanted to spend the weekend with all the, like, you know, what happens behind this, like behind the gram, you know, like on the ground with these people. And it just occurred to me the other day, like, as much as I wanted to do this like lurking sociological type piece about that, I'm never going to be able to like do that again and have it have the same relevance. And like, that's kind of tight.
They were going to close down the TikTok influencer house. Like, that's a great sign.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm really, really curious to see, like, for, you know, what we what are seen as like big like cultural like moments or parts of Los Angeles. Like, you know, obviously Coachella is not, it's part of Los Angeles culture, whether we like it or not, you know. But, you know, I'm interested to see like what the kind of festival culture that we really cultivate in Southern California and the in Hollywood influencer culture that goes side by side with it, how that's going to change, because none of that like really is going to ring true anymore. It's just not, like, that's no longer the trajectory. I'm hoping and wondering, like, I think whether we're gonna see like kind of like a really return to like community, people getting to know their neighbors and neighborhoods better, people spending more time in their neighborhoods, less time in their cars, you know, and that's going to, I think, and like going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, as far as like local identity and like the sound of a place, I'm really wondering, kind of hoping if like there's gonna be a lot more like LA sounds coming out and that are speaking specifically to like what we're undergoing in this like crazy cultural existential free fall we're in right now. But how that manifests in LA can be very different from how that manifests in Oakland or Austin or, you know, wherever else. And there's gonna be, I think, kind of, yeah, I guess I'm really excited to see LA like double down on its community nature and everyone just spending time like more outside together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think, you know, after all this is like over, I think we're all gonna have like a sense of community in the way of like, man, we all survived 2020. We survived the pandemic. We were in LA. Like, do you remember when this happened? Do you remember the protests? Like, and we're all gonna kind of look at each other and share our point of views. You know what I mean? You know, I'm not sure. Hip hop. Did you live in New York during 9/11? I think you're muted.
Yeah. I was in New York during 9/11.
Is there like a sense of, you know, a community of like people who live there? I'm sure there is, where it's like everybody remembers
that day, right?
That day.
Yeah, no, it definitely was a cool couple of days of like everybody feel like they was together for a little while. And I think LA was sensing that recently with just dealing with Kobe and Nipsey.
Yeah.
And that was already I feel bringing the city together.
For sure.
And then with the protesting, this is like one of the I feel one of the centers of most of the protests I've seen. There was so many of them in LA.
I'm going right now with the Deshaun Kissy and
so it's been like, because that was during the pandemic. That was the first time when it was like, oh, people going outside, and it was because of the protests. That's you know, that's when
it was that important.
Yeah, and so I think that part is already in LA, the Kobe and the Nipsey thing. So I think so going into it with that, I think is gonna come out of that with some of the traits that those guys carried. It seemed like a lot of people was picking that up, whether it was the black, you know, Mamba mentality, or whether it was the marathon continues, and just the businesses, the black businesses, things like Leimert Park, like you said, with Pharrell and J Video. A lot of those things came from a person like Nipsey. Like, I guarantee you they said his name a few times when they was making that song and really thinking about the vision for the video. Because I was there at the video shoot, just seeing it. I just happened to be in Leimert Park, and Calmatic was shooting the video and stuff, and it was just because he was doing it at my friend's Chase coffee shop at Haroon. And it was just a whole different vibe of when I go over there, and I love being over there because it reminds me of Harlem and certain parts of Brooklyn. And I think that when I used to hear Dom Kennedy mentioning Leimert, and I might have went by there a few times back then, it wasn't this vibrant musically. I'm sure way before that it had a moment as well. Kind of like during the Project Road, Good Life, and all that time.
In between.
In between. So it was like a little down part, I guess, because of gangster rap, and people were just afraid to go anywhere south of the 10. So I think that kind of opened up again. As I go back to Nipsey again,
it's a destination now.
Yeah, I think Nipsey really opened it up when he set his shop up, because that's when people I knew was coming. They was going right there, and people didn't go to that area, to that side of town, and stuff like that. So I think that is going to have a big effect on the LA even more than the pandemic and anything of that nature, because it's going to, just from the art and the way it is, and it's going to keep ringing through. I don't know what they're going to eventually do for these guys permanently, but it just feels like just what they left and that impact, I think, is going to have a big effect on it, for sure.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm excited to see like the streets. I mean, LA is big, but if you're in the mix, you know what's really going on in the city. And like you said, rest in peace, Kobe, Nip, everything going on with the protests. The city, it feels very united. And I feel like a couple years from now, we're gonna look back and see that, this really did bring a lot of people together. And there's going to be a lot of good coming out of it. I'm really excited to see like what the underground scene is going to bring for us. Because just kind of being around some of the artists and seeing how they're moving now, people are moving a little differently now, and there's a lot of work that's being put in right now during these times. So we're going to see like the outcome of all that work in the next, couple years or so. And then definitely look back on this moment and appreciate, the adjustment.
Totally.
We have a question from Eric Deep. What's going on, Eric? Good guy, good writer. Do you see virtual concerts staying after the pandemic? How do you guys think this is going to affect how a show or festival will look? Will it be all drive-in experiences?
Good question.
And feel free if you have more questions to type them in the chat.
I have been wondering that a lot myself. I've sort of been, as you're seeing other platforms like TikTok and Twitch, Fortnite, all sort of pick up the live music slack, if you will. I've been wondering, like, are we going to emerge out of this, and instead of it being like Golden Voice versus Live Nation versus independent promoters, are you then going to see like all of the live promoters then versus
Zoom?
Versus Zoom. I don't, the majority of people in the industry, whether it's like artists, promoters, agents that I've been talking to, the people that are actually like out there like running stuff, like live music's not going to go away. Like no musician I've talked to is like, yeah, I think this is, this is cool. It's opening creative doors, certainly, but I guess I'm not doing a great job of answering the question. I'm just speculating on it, but it's definitely going to be part of the experience now. It's going to be standard, also because not just because it's like filling a need right now, but it's also opening up a lot of new ways of experiencing this stuff and finding new audiences and crossover audiences. I'm just hoping it will be an and not an or.
I think the Versus concerts were kind of a good thing where you were like, okay, well, that's like a positive, where it's like, granted, some of them, the performance element of it wasn't what it could have been, but the dance hall one was incredible. The dance hall Versus they had. I mean, like Luda and like, or the Snoop Dogg and 2 Chainz one. I mean, just, what was it? Snoop? Yeah, or was it? No, it's 2 Chainz.
Snoop
and DMX.
Snoop and DMX. That was incredible. Watching Snoop like kind of, and that to me was like, okay. I mean, RZA and Premier, even though there were technical difficulties, it's just like the hip hop nerd in me is like, oh shit, RZA here, like
right.
I'm waiting for this my entire life, and that was like a cool thing. So it kind of, I think it's been said, but this is sort of an accelerator, right, of existing trends that had kind of been floating around in the ether before this all happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think hopefully that could be one of the positive things we get from it. I mean, even
because I think technology as well is delivering a better show as far as that goes. So with the platforms like the YouTubes and the streaming and things of that nature, like Tidal is doing a lot with their shows. They always did festivals and showed live streaming, but with the Uzi and the Meg shows recently, I think things like that will definitely stay because of just the reach. It's still like live shows is good, but they still have a ceiling. There's still a capacity. So, and it's still time. So it's still like, do I really want to go to all 50 of these places? And, you know, so it's still a lot of wear and tear on that, to where you could now sit in your house and reach millions of people. And if they could figure out the economics behind that, I'm sure a lot of people will just find different ways to, whether it's Patreon, OnlyFans, whatever it is, just that experience of being able to get, you know, well, not subscriptions, but millions of people to pay for you, you know, to where it takes a long time to, that's a lot of shows to reach 1 million people. So if you could do that and you could bring it down some, and it's only $5 or whatever it might be, it's still going to be advertising. It's still going to be whatever that platform is, exclusivity. So it's still going to be ways to make money around it, and it is cleaner, just like the NBA right now with the bubble and them being able to deliver. I'm sure they missing money, but I'm sure they saving money in some ways as well, because it's not 60 venues
traveling.
And how many venues and how many places, how many people got to work there, how many things they would have to do, of just all these moving parts. So now you got, like they have at the Versus, it was a lot when they had two locations. It was like hard to get done. Now they in the same place, and it's like, wow, this experience is beautiful now. They wouldn't even split it up no more. So I think that element of being able to really stage something the way you can at you know, at online pay-per-view or however you do it. I think battle rap is doing a lot of that as well. Battle rap always kind of did that, where it was a live element and it was a pay-per-view element. And then also after that, it lives on YouTube. So that's 3 ways of getting paid right there. So I think, you know, because most shows don't really have good footage. So I think that part of it is really getting focused on. So they're delivering good content. As long as that's the case, I think it's definitely going to stay. Because too many people turning down no money, especially coming out of the pandemic. So
it's going to be a lot more normalized. As much as I'm not really a fan of it, I've done a couple live performances, or I guess stream performances. Definitely not the same. I feel just speaking on the DJ side of things, and just as a fan, you know, we would all much rather, you know, be at the venues, at the concerts, at the festivals. But I can see it being, you know.
Yeah. Because now you're like worldwide. Some people might never have a chance to you might never go to where they from. So now it's like, you still got fans there. Like, I'm sure nobody going to North Dakota. Certain cities, you know, like I remember we went to New Orleans one time and they said, "Dad, this is the biggest show to ever come to New Orleans." I was like, wow. And it was just you know, it might have been a Blueprint show or something like that, but it was just certain cities just never see these shows. They never see these artists, the venues, just timing of it, the promoters. And now that music is so diverse, it's even harder for artists to really fill up a venue at random cities if they haven't really built it up yet. So I think that part, and being able to, you know, everybody that's there, just like what we're doing right now, like everybody that's here want to be here. It's not like a people that's just happen to just pass by and, you know, it's a thing to go, you know, they tuning in, and it's you know, it's a different type of commitment, I think, when, you know, and it's a whole nother experience. So of course the live thing will always be there, but I think just the reach is something you can't really match.
Very valuable.
And
I think it's...
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, I think it's definitely here to stay. And I think it's also making at least like hip hop artists look at their live show, you know, from a different perspective of like, okay, if this gets streamed, how's it going to look? And I think, you know, the sets are going to be a lot more elaborate now. You know, I think they're going to want to put on like a very strong digital concert kind of as a trailer to a live show. You know what I mean? To where it's like, oh man, like look what he has this, or she has this. Like it's like like choreographed, like on stage. Like you're seeing that because now you realize like, oh, this is gonna live on, you know. And like I used to watch like my parents and grandparents, you know, see like old concerts like on TV, and I'm like, what are you watching that for? Like that's boring. Like, and now I'm like, oh no, I could definitely see, you know, if like you said, like a 2 Chainz or like these parking lot concerts, if they have really good footage, you know, of everything going on there, I'm like, that's something I want to watch. I'll spend an hour watching it. You know what I mean? We'll have some friends over, we'll have it playing in the background. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that.
We got another question from my guy Camilo. What's going on? Can Cypress and Vic talk about how they've been working with other Latino artists, especially from places like Texas, and how this time of COVID has impacted the ability to collab outside of LA?
I recently just did a record with an artist from Texas by the name of Domanick. And I do work with other Latino artists, but we just did a record, LA to Houston. It's actually coming out next week on Mexican Independence Day. But I guess COVID allowed this record to happen because it gave us time to, you know, be in the studio. It allowed him to travel over here and stay out here for a couple of weeks, and for us to, you know, really work. So I'd say like COVID provided me with a lot more studio time than I would have had if I was on the road. Because when I was on the road, it was mostly shows. If I could find a studio that night, you know, I'd probably hit the studio. But COVID has allowed me to just have more time in the studio. And that's given me, you know, the opportunity to work with a lot of Hispanic, Latino artists.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think is, you know, I've been, you know, able to work with a few Latino artists. Doman, you know, definitely one. When he flew in, you know, he flew into a session. I had him work with another artist, like I helped manage. And yeah, I think, you know, for some reason, I don't know why, a lot of Texas artists like were in LA like 2 weeks ago, and a lot of them stayed for like 2-3 weeks. And like Cypress said, I think the pandemic, everything being slowed down, they're not getting club bags, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. I'm sure they probably visited other cities as well, and are kind of like, you know, I think LA artists are doing that as well. You know, LA artists are like flying to Atlanta to work, you know, and it's like, since everything's been slowed down and you're not necessarily missing out on money by going somewhere, or you don't have as strict a schedule, I think a lot of opportunities are being made out of that. So like Cypress said, like we're gonna look back and be like, oh, this was, you know, in a way there was you know, a blessing that came out of, you know, all this craziness and everything, because it just opened up a lot of things, created a lot of opportunities.
Got another question. How can an unknown LA artist gain a fan base during this new COVID-19 world? And that's from Brando Batiste. Anyone want to jump in?
It's a little more challenging, but I feel like, you know, just got to make good music. Make good music. Platforms are there. You know, good music will always sell itself. And, you know, as bad as times are, you know, everybody I know is either on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube. I guess that's just a new way to really push the music. Yeah. Good music always just gonna sell itself. So
yeah,
work hard, stay in the studio.
I think it's those platforms.
You know?
Yeah, I think it's like what hip hop was talking about earlier, like these new platforms. You know, TikTok. Like I just seen like there's this kid named Huhim from San Bernardino. He went viral on TikTok. He's like #1, and a song called "Let's Link," and now it just entered the the Billboard Hot 100 at number 90, like overnight. Damn it, it's released like 2-3 weeks ago maybe. And I think stuff like that is like, you know, really catching on. And you know, digital marketing is definitely a way. It's like, you know, as long as the music's good, you know, good music is undeniable.
Yeah. And I say like get with other local artists, like becoming a part of a community, like getting some features. I feel like paying artists that's have some sort of relevance to be on your record is worth it nowadays. Just especially if you're trying to get in the introduction or something like that. Just think about Rowdy being on that Nipsey record over when the first time I ever heard of him, but it came right out. And so I think getting with the right people, knowing where you want to go, knowing the type of music you're making, and kind of just getting into those crowds and really, I think becoming a part of that, because it's a lot of different movements in LA. So you got to really figure out what you're trying to do, and then just be with those guys, befriend them, do what you got to do. Hopefully your music is good enough that they feel like they want to be a part of it. But you'll be surprised. Like most artists will love to do features and love to take bags and
totally
go to the studio and do stuff. So
or buy a feature, right? Because everyone's home and they have like not as much cash coming in, so it's like it's a buyer's market right now.
Call Jim Jones Quarantine Studios. You know what I'm saying?
Every first of the month, target a rapper.
Yeah, exactly. But keep it local, like you said. You know what I mean? Like, and then move on. You know what I mean? But try to get it as hot as possible in your area.
It's a great time to be doing that too. I think it's like finding that community and the people that your music that your music speaks to, and like also just to be asking yourself like why are you making this art, like why now and for whom. Like I know it's a little like woo big picture, but I think you kind of like success right now, I just feel like is all about like reverse engineering everything down to the why.
I agree.
And like hip hop, like you were saying earlier, it's like there's people are being forced to figure stuff out for themselves right now, right? Like they just have to do it themselves with the systems that we all like knew how to operate within, whether record labels or media companies or like PR or whatever. Like they're not there anymore. They're not going to help you. But that's where innovation comes from, right? Like figuring out how to do something yourself. And like there is only going to be more and more awesome tools, like for connecting with people, from recording your own stuff at home, or finding some of these like new platforms that I've been writing about that are allowing, artists and music industry people to actually like connect with each other. It's like there's like Airbnbs for like studio collaborations, remote studio collaborations now. Like that's awesome, and it's putting the power back in the creator's hands. So it's all there for you.
Awesome. All right. Well,
will be. I don't know.
Awesome. Well,
Jeff, you're disappearing.
I know. The lighting is really bad. What can I say? I didn't have my. Our millions of dollars couldn't pay for the Zoom studio, unfortunately. Next time. Right. No, I just want to do the Homer Simpson thing, right? It's like fade into the
yeah, that's what I was looking like.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank everyone that's tuning in. We really appreciate it, and thank you for caring and for your time, and to all the panelists here. Thank you again for the insight and the knowledge. It's deeply appreciated. And if there's anything you guys want to plug, please, feel free. We're leaving now, so plug whatever you have to plug.
Read theLAnd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out theLAnd magazine.
Round of applause for Jeff and theLAnd. You guys have done an amazing job. Thanks for bringing us all together.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Rosecransave.com at Rosecrans Vic.
Mm-hmm.